All right, and now I'm gonna go here. There's 10 people waiting, of course. And let me refresh this screen. And it's live. So it worked.
Great.
So let's see. Let's go back to the Zoom. So what I'll do is, so now basically between now and 5 minutes, it's just us talking, but once you're ready to go, we can begin the live stream at any time.
Well, I'm ready. I'll be ready to go in 5 minutes.
All right, that sounds good. So those of you that are watching now, I'm gonna go ahead and just give it. We will be starting at roughly 5 minutes. So feel free to jump in, and we will be getting started shortly. As you can see, every once in a while, you see the great David Levy is online, and I will be actively listening along with the rest of you. So I'll be repeating myself here in a few minutes. So just stay tuned. You're just gonna probably see my face moving around, looking at my phone like this. That's what I'll be doing. But we'll be getting started very shortly. And feel free to say anything in the chat. Let's see, Ken, welcome. Harmony, welcome to the presentation. We see you there. If you're there, feel free to chime in. Don't forget to like this. If you've joined, just go ahead and like the video now because it's David Levy. And it's his poetry. So Dale, good to see you on there on the chat. Be sure to like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to this is our headliner page. David,
this is Adrian, my friend Adrian. He's in charge of me this afternoon.
Yep. Yeah,
I'm just introducing you to Wendy.
Dave just says I'm in charge of him this afternoon.
Where's your camera? I'll just wave.
Yeah.
Anyway, hi Adrian. I'm listening
Hi, how you doing?
Just fine. You're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Electronicing and everything.
Yes.
That's what we're doing. We're electronicking.
Yeah.
For those who can't hear on the stream, we're chatting. David's wife is making sure that I'm taking good care of David, and that's what I do. Let's see, Dave, you've got some folks on the chat. Kenneth Burton is here to see you. William Shaheen retracted his message. Harmony Smurf from the Seven Ponds, welcome aboard. Fellow AACC member Dave is here. Dave and I are in a camera club from Ann Arbor, and we love taking photos. I came along and I started doing night photos. This camera club takes beautiful photos. Ken, that's a very good question. How could one not like David Levy? Well, Dave, we know that your humility is a part of what has been a part of you forever, and that helps you to always appreciate the night sky. It's something that I take from you. No matter how big you get, the night sky is always bigger. And let's see, we got Bob is in here. Hey, Bob. Bob has been a huge help to us getting astronomy on the virtual beach off the ground. Mary O'Donnell, David, she's a woman after your own heart. She loves the night sky. She loves the night sky with naked eyes. She's a comet lover in dark skies. So she will be listening to your presentation. I am going to go ahead and pin you. So instead of seeing my face, they can, let's see, I'm going to make you a co-host first of all, even though it doesn't, you mentioned you're not going to share anything, but that's okay. We can still.
No, you just get me and my magic book today.
That's good. The Book of Observations. So let's go
Actually,
ahead and
it's a book
start
of poetry.
the Book of Poetry.
Yeah, it's my magic book.
Yeah, I think you have another magic book, and it's with your observations in it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. Are you ready?
Here's the magic book, the other magic book, my
There you
Zoom
go.
log.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I am looking for a bio, so this isn't how you're supposed to do it, but that's okay. Let's all right. So thank you all for joining. Of course, we are about to listen to David Levy. He is a doctor, but he's also a very avid amateur astronomer. I'll read a little bit of his bio for you because I want to go ahead and just get right started with his presentation, Poetry of the Night Sky. So David H. Levy is one of the most successful comet discoverers in history. He's discovered 22 comets, 9 of them using his own backyard telescopes. With Eugene and Carolyn Shoemaker at the Palomar Observatory in California, he discovered Shoemaker-Levy 9, the comet that collided with Jupiter in 1994. Now, many of you that may have remembered that comet, it made headline news. It was a big comet that I remember watching it, and I wasn't as into astronomy as I am now. It fascinated everybody. And also, we are also worried that, what if one of those things hit Earth? One of those fragments would have pretty much blown the planet up. So it was also a sobering view. So right quick, Levy is the author or editor of 35 books and other products. He won an Emmy in 1998 as part of the writing team for the Discovery Channel documentary 3 Minutes to Impact. As a science editor for Parade magazine from 1997 to 2006, he was able to reach more than 80 million readers, almost a quarter of the population of the United States. A contributing editor for Sky and Telescope magazine, he writes its monthly Star Trails column, and his Nightfall feature appears in each issue of the Canadian Magazine Skynews. With that, I am going to let you hear from the man himself, my friend, fellow Warren Astronomy Society member, Dr. David H. Levy. Everyone give him a virtual hand. I'm going on mute. You don't need to see my face. You didn't come to see me. You came to see Dr. David Levy. So take it away, David.
Well, thank you, Adrian. It's really good to see you and to chat with you a little bit. But let's start today. We don't have a PowerPoint. We don't have mathematics. We don't have equations. But we do have this, which is my magic book. And we will now begin. Hung be the heavens with black, yield day to night. Comets, importing changes in times and states, brandish your crystal tresses in the sky. I begin with a quote from Henry VI, Part 1, Shakespeare's one of his earliest history plays. And it's the first 3 lines of that play. And the interesting thing about that is it's one of his first plays, and it's the first 3 lines of that plays. And he writes about something astronomical, not just the night sky, but I have studied these 3 lines extensively, and I've tried to understand how to interpret them. And most of the scholars that have interpreted them talk about the black curtain that they held over the globe stage back then, and they could throw the curtain down, making a sudden change to day to night. But I didn't buy that. I think Shakespeare was a lot smarter than to just see his world as a stage. And you remember that other little Shakespeare quote, all the world's a stage, which recently appeared on a Star Trek episode when Q said all the galaxy's a stage. And Picard says, world, not galaxy. And then Q said, well, if he were alive now, he would have said galaxy. And that's probably right. But even then, I think Shakespeare was too darn smart to just see his world as a stage. I think he saw the world as the world. And he thought, hung be the heavens with black, yield day to night. So he's not talking about the gradual and beautiful change that we all know about that takes place when the sun goes down. And gradually the sun goes down and it's day. And then over the next hour, day turns to night very gradually. But he's not talking about that. He says, hung be the heavens with black, yield day to night. He's talking about a sudden change. Well, can that happen? Well, one supposes it could happen during a rapidly approaching thunderstorm. But I don't think Shakespeare was talking about thunderstorms. I think Shakespeare was talking about total solar eclipses. And I've seen 11 of those or 12 of those. And in the last minute or so, between when there's just a crescent sun in the sky and suddenly there's no sun, just the corona, you get a change that is so fast from light to darkness that it just doesn't make sense. It's just a very sudden yielding of day to night. But he goes on a little bit more because he wants to tell you not just about the night sky. He wants to talk about something that meant a lot to him, and it means a lot to me, comets. So the first word of his second line of his play is comets. And he talks about importing changes in times and states. Back in Shakespeare's day, comets were really harbingers of evil. And they were really very special to do that. And one wonders how that was considered over the time. Perhaps the most famous comet of all might come to mind at that point, Halley's Comet. And I'm now going to quote from one of my very favorite writers, Leslie Peltier, who wrote about Halley's Comet. Excuse me. Within historic times, 28 visits by Halley's Comet have been recorded. On an early trip, it witnessed the defeat of Attila's Huns in AD 451. It arrived in time to preside over the Norman conquest in 1066. In the year 1456, the menacing appearance of the comet so alarmed Pope Calixtus that he decreed several days of prayer and established the midday Angelus. With a great clanging of bells, he then besought the comet to visit its wrath solely on the invading Turks. In 1607, and here is where we get up to Shakespeare. In 1607, it was watched by both Shakespeare and Kepler, and I like to think it was also seen by Captain John Smith and Pocahontas in the frontier skies of Jamestown's. On his following trip around in 1682, the comet was observed by Halley himself, who probed into its periodic past and bequeathed to it an honored name that it can bear with pride throughout the solar system. By 1835, when it returned, affairs of Earth had speeded up. Many a canal boat traveler looking down could see the comet glowing on the surface of his highway. Man himself had taken to the skies when the comet appeared in 1910, for he was making fledgling flights of perhaps 100 miles. In 1986, you have to remember, this was written before 1986. Our historic visitor will be visited in turn, for in that year, a spacecraft from the Earth will hold a rendezvous with Halley's Comet out in space. And that indeed did happen. Specifically, the Giotto probe. And there is a kind of a story about that, because the Giotto probe was a European probe. The Soviets, the time they still had the Soviet Union, sent the Vega 1 and 2 probes to Venus and then to Halley's Comet. But what about the United States? The United States did not send a probe to Halley's Comet. They had one designed, but it was never funded. And I remember reading in Newsweek an editorial by the famous columnist George Will, and very conservative, but I still admire him to no end. He said, you know, the US made a big mistake in not sending a probe to Halley's Comet. And I've never forgotten that. And then Peltier, going back to Peltier, he ends with, who would venture to foretell the wonders and achievements which the comet will witness in that distant year of 2062? And now we get to the last sentence. Or will man himself prove periodic? Will the Huns be back again? And as we think of what's happening to our planet today, I can't imagine a more appropriate way to end this thing about Halley's Comet. Okay. So we've introduced Shakespeare, who I guess is my favorite writer altogether. But it was a little while before two things happened in my life that I was able to really to appreciate Shakespeare as a writer. One was that in those days, people didn't observe the night sky. This was the first big mistake. People didn't observe the night sky for what it was. They observed the night sky for what it could do. They studied where the planets were. They studied the sky for astrology. So we could skip Shakespeare and go all the way to the modern age, except for one thing. Not from the stars do I my judgment pluck. Who wrote that? That was Shakespeare himself in Sonnet 14. And yet methinks I have astronomy. Shakespeare himself said that he really did not follow astrology. Instead, he had to put it into his plays because he knew his audiences followed it. And he was writing plays and he wanted to make some money off these plays. And so he had to put a lot of astrology and the idea that comets could import changes in times and states. And I can tell you right now, if Shakespeare were alive and he were sitting in the audience at Astronomy on the Beach, or actually at home with his laptop, and I think he'd actually be pretty good at running a computer. Imagine what the plays he would write if he had had Microsoft Word to write them with. He would have written To Be or Not to Be in about 15 seconds? No. Actually, probably would have taken a lot longer, would have gone through a lot more revisions than what actually happened when Shakespeare took his pen and actually put pen to parchment and started writing the work that he did back then. I honestly think that if Shakespeare were alive today, he would want to be more of an astronomer. He would be here at Astronomy on the Beach. He would join the Warren Astronomical Society. He would probably be a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And he would be a member of the wonderful club that Adrian has been doing, the lowbrow astronomy group. And I'm sure that he would be the lowest brow because for everything else, he was a real person with likes and dislikes. And I think he would have loved being in a group that is as friendly and as exciting as the Warren Club and the University Lowbrow Astronomers. One of the reasons that I got into Shakespeare, in fact, the main reason that I got into Shakespeare was my father. I remember going outside one day and Dad came down just as I was leaving. I was going to go to school or something. And he said, I want you to be interested in Shakespeare. I want you to love Shakespeare because if you fall in love with that writer, you will learn more about what that man had to teach about life and the lessons of life and what's really important in life is beyond anyone else. And he was so passionate about getting me interested in Shakespeare that I honestly got the idea that if I failed to get interested in Shakespeare, he would take me out of his will and he wouldn't leave me any inheritance. And so I decided, well, I better at least follow it. And it turns out in the ninth grade, then we were studying The Merchant of Venice. And I thought, yeah, Dad, you really got this wrong. And then we got to this famous line, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the face beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesses those that gives and those that takes. And I read that and I thought, this is really pretty spectacular. This is really pretty interesting stuff. And then in the next grade, we're reading Julius Caesar. Comets die many times before their death. The valiant never tastes of death but once. He's actually writing about comets. And it turns out, since you all heard me quote comets importing changes in times and states, this is at least the second time that Shakespeare has written about comets, which have become my very favorite part of astronomy. And I like to think that Shakespeare really was as passionate about comets in a certain way as I am. And that goes way back to my own beginnings as an astronomer, way back in 1956, when my mom and dad decided they were sending me away to summer camp. Oh, I hated that camp, Twin Lake Camp in Vermont. Some of the older people here may actually remember that camp in Vermont. And I went there and writing my mom letters saying, please take me out of this horrible prison place. I promise if you only will let me come home, I will enjoy. I will be good. I will make my bed every day. I'll be a wonderful son. If only you will take me out of this terrible camp. Mom wrote back and said, we love you very much, but you're staying. You need to learn to love your parents from a distance, which is a very wise thing for her to say, because that's exactly what it taught me. But we were looking at other things in the sky at that time and other things around there. And I remember a social evening one night when my counselor asked if I would mind going up in front of the camp and singing a Welsh folk song, a Welsh prayer. And I kind of enjoyed it myself, and I agreed to do that. I was very nervous going up and picking up the microphone like I'm doing right now, taking a deep breath and going, sleep, my child, and peace attend thee all through the night. Guardian angels, God will send thee all through the night. Soft the drowsy hours are keeping, hill and vale in slumber sleeping. I lie loving, vigil keeping all through the night. And while the moon her watch is keeping all through the night, or their spirit gently stealing, visions of delight revealing, breathes a pure and holy feeling all through the night. That's a very beautiful old Welsh tune. And I still enjoy it all these years later. And it kind of reminded me that maybe the place, Twin Lake Camp, wasn't so bad after all. And right about that time, our little cabin was sent home early while the sky was still a little bit bright but darkening on July the 4th, 1956. We're walking up the path. And going to our cabin. And I looked up and I saw a shooting star just like that. It wasn't a very bright one. Now I figured about second magnitude. And it was heading from Draco towards the brightest star in the sky, which I now know is Vega. And looking at it, and I was startled by it. I asked the others, I said, did you kids see this shooting star just now? And they said, no, we didn't. And suddenly the thought hit me. Is it possible? Is it possible that that shooting star was sent only for me? Was it somehow a message for me that this is something that I, at age 8, get interested in? I took that very seriously. And I began paying close attention to the to the night sky and to shooting stars. It is a love that I have kept going until this day. And one of the things that I've learned in my life as an astronomer, especially a young one, is that if you want to learn about something, there can be no better way than writing about it, writing a book about it. So in 7th grade, I decided to write a book called Up in Space. It wasn't much of a book, but I still have it in my library. And after that was finished in 8th grade, I decided to do a slightly better effort called an encyclopedia of the universe. And what would an 8th grader do writing an encyclopedia? Well, I still have that book. And in fact, here is one of the pages. I'll just show it to you. That's one of the pages, page 260, Orbital Motion of Doubles. In the summer of 1962, I had my book, my typewriter, and my book out there under a tree at Summit Park, not far from our home in Montreal. And I started writing about orbital motions of double stars. And everything was going fine until I got to the place, the revolution period in years, an upside down U, which stands for the position angle, and then of the node that is between 0 and 180 degrees, and W for the plane. And as I'm writing for the plane, something happened to the typewriter. One of the keys got loose or something. And those days I had quite a temper. So I yanked the page out of the typewriter and threw it on the ground. So I yanked the typewriter and slammed it into the tree. And that caused a few other keys to get loose. And so I slammed it back and forth against the tree. Tree didn't fall down. In fact, the tree wasn't hurt at all. So I went back, I put the thing back on my bicycle because I wasn't going to do any more typing that day. And I rode back home. The next day, feeling a lot better, I asked Mom, I said, Mom, do you mind if I borrow your typewriter to go up to the summit and continue typing my book? And Mom said, what's wrong with your typewriter? I said, well, it kind of has a problem with it. And she said, okay, sure. So I went back up, and here's the page again. I'm not sure how closely you can see this right now, but the middle line of the page is where the page broke. I simply took the bottom half of the page, put it in, and continued where I left off. Page 260 in my book is still there as two halves of a page. What I have here is, let me do this. That is the tree, the beautiful maple tree that I threw the typewriter at that day. It's still doing beautifully at the Summit Park, where it gets a lot more rain than we do here in southern Arizona, but it's kind of fun. And what do I have here? I have another astronomical quotation. No, it's not astronomical, but it goes like this. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. That comes from The Conclusion of Walden by Henry David Thoreau, written around 1845. So, going to all kinds of things. There was another time when I was leaving the house about to go to school, and Dad asked me about Shakespeare. But by this time he knew I was hooked on Shakespeare. But then he said, that's not enough. He said, I'd like you to get interested in some of the other writers of that time, like Fletcher. Beaumont and Fletcher, they wrote some magnificent stuff. So years later, it took me a lot longer to get into Fletcher than it did to get into Shakespeare. But years later, I was looking up in a library about Fletcher's 1605 play called The Woman Hater. And one of the first lines of that is two people talking. They're outside just before dawn, expecting dawn to start soon. And they're saying it's late. And one of them says, "Is it so much? And yet the morn not up. See yonder where the shamefaced maiden comes into our sight. How gently doth she slide, hiding her chaste cheeks like a modest bride with a red veil of blushes." He wrote some fantastic stuff, Fletcher. And I got very interested in Fletcher as well. I loved Shakespeare in high school. I loved Shakespeare in college. I took a course specifically on Shakespeare in third year at Acadia. And in my book, we were actually studying King Lear, and we got to the part about eclipses. Shakespeare spent 2 pages talking about eclipses. These late eclipses in the sun and moon portend no good to us. Did I put a big star by it saying astronomy, astrophysics? No. I did put a little mark on the paper that this was a very important passage, but I had no comment. And in all the writing I did then, I had no comment to make about Shakespeare having an interest in the night sky. I wasn't there. I was too stupid to see it. I got a little bit smarter as I was getting ready to do my master's degree at Queen's University. We were watching the Lyrid meteor shower. And I think, I can tell by Adrian's expression that we're all familiar with the Lyrid meteor shower at the end of April. This was a clear night in Montreal. It was a Friday night. We're sitting out by the observatory and we're looking at the sky and seeing a meteor here and a meteor there. It wasn't a very heavy shower, but there were meteors and we loved it. And that night, I began to think, I wonder what astronomers of old thought when they were sitting out here on a field like this, watching the Lyrid meteors. And then I let my mind wander a little more. I wonder what other people in other walks of life might have thought if they had glimpsed a Lyrid or two. And I thought, I wonder if there's a connection between literature and astronomy. And all of a sudden, everything that I had done in my life, the Shakespeare, other things, is it so much and yet the morn not up? It turns out that they're outside looking at Virgo rising in the east. They're looking at Virgo, and so somebody's agreeing with me just now. The shamefaced maiden comes into our sight. And so why are they making such a comment about Virgo? They commented about the eyes of Virgo. Well, Virgo, as you know, has only one bright star, that's Spica. So they're not eyes of Virgo, it's eye of Virgo, but not in 1605. Did a little research. And I found out that when Virgo rose before dawn, as it does every December, someone else is agreeing here. I didn't give you my phone number, you know. You don't have to call me when you agree or disagree with something. Okay. Anyway, that particular rising of the constellation of Virgo did indeed have 2 eyes. Spica was there, but Mars was also rising early that pre-dawn day in 1605. So there really were 2 eyes, one of them a red bloodshot eye, and the other the beautiful blue Spica. Now Mars, of course, is not there right now. Mars is in the fall sky, and if you have a clear night tonight, or the next time you do get a clear night, you must go outside and look at Mars and see it is so big now. I believe I can actually detect a disk with the unaided eye, without binoculars, without a telescope. Obviously, no detail on that disk, but it seems to subtend an arc of about 30 seconds. It's about the distance of separation of the star Albireo in Cygnus. That's about the size that Mars is showing right now. It's gorgeous. It's one of the best oppositions we have had in my lifetime. So far, the post-perihelion Martian dust storm hasn't kicked in yet. We're getting beautiful, beautiful views of it. And one of the things that excites me the most is in just a few days, the Syrtis Major will be on the planet during the evening hours. Won't that be exciting to see? I want to try to get some pictures of that. It is by far the darkest area of the planet and the darkest albedo feature on the planet. Well worth seeing. If you can't wait to see that, go out tonight and you'll be able to see the Mare Acidalium, which is the second best feature on Mars, and that is up right now. And in a few days, because Mars has a rotation period a little bit longer than ours. The rotation period of Mars is 24 hours and 37 minutes, which means every few days, a different part of Mars is visible at the same time from here, which makes it just about perfect. The day after that meteor watch, when I was looking at the Lyrids, I happened to take a train to meet Dr. Norman Mackenzie, who would be my master's thesis supervisor. And by then I decided I'm going to try to relate my passion of the night sky with English literature. And when I got there, I told him that that's what I wanted to do. And right away he suggested, well, then you must take my course on Hopkins, Yates, and Elliott. And because Hopkins was an amateur astronomer, he loved the night sky. Of course, I couldn't get more excited about that. And so when we started the course, I started studying Hopkins. And as you know, as I think all of you know who have studied Hopkins in high school, Hopkins is about the most complicated poet and the most difficult poet to read of any. He is very, very difficult. He has very complicated rhyme schemes. And well, if I can find this here, here it is. Okay. He does sprung rhythm and all of these things which make his reading very, very difficult to say. And those of you who see a picture of me here, I'm assuming that you can on the YouTube, you see my telescope, which is right here. And Wendy very carefully put my book, my autobiography here, so that I could plug it a little bit during my talk, which I shall do now. It's called A Night Watchman's Journey, The Road Not Taken. And it's the story of my life. And we've managed to keep this book a pretty good secret over the last year. Not too many people have seen it, but it is available. You can buy a copy online at the website of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, www.rasc.ca. And you go to the store, the book will be there. They'll be happy to send a copy to you. And one of the things that I write about in that book is my attempt to see something interesting in the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins, who put me literally to sleep in high school. And I was looking at his stuff, and I was looking at some of his early stuff before he developed his complex rhythms. And I found this poem about a comet. And I'm going to read that to you right now. I am like a slip of comet, scarce worth discovery, in some corner seen, bridging the slender difference of two stars. come out of space or suddenly engendered by heady elements, for no man knows. He wrote this poem, obviously, to be in the Renaissance before Halley's time, because we certainly know, men and women know, that comets are part of space right now. But when she sights the sun, she grows and sizes and spins her skirts out, while her central star shakes its cocooning mists. And so she comes to fields of light. Millions of traveling rays pierce her. She hangs upon the flame-cased sun and sucks the light as full as Gideon's fleece. But then her tether calls her. She falls off, and as she dwindles, sheds her smock of gold amidst the sistering planets. And then till she comes to single Saturn, last and solitary, and then goes out into the cavernous dark. So I go out, my little suite is done. I have drawn heat from this contagious sun. To not ungentle death, now forth I run. With everything I had written about Hopkins, this poem excited me no end. Years later, Dr. Mackenzie gave a lecture at Queen's about Hopkins, Queen's University, and he mentioned my interest in that poem. And he said, I have to say that I have never encountered anyone who got more enthusiastic about a work of English literature than David did about the Hopkins comet poem. I went to Dr. Mackenzie and I said, I want to write about this poem. I want to find out what comet he had in mind. He said, that's going to be kind of difficult because I don't know what comet he had in mind. Well, he wrote the poem in 1864. So I went back to Donati's comet, that famous comet of 1858. And I was wondering, probably wasn't that, because it was been a number of years after. What about the great comet of 1861? It had a head when it was at its maximum that rose near the star Capella, and a tail that stretched all the way across the sky into Hercules. Must have been that one. Still too far. Could it have been Swift-Tuttle in 1862, the parent of the Perseid meteor stream? I doubt it. But then came 1864, comet Tempel-Respighi. Not that big a comet, but it got very close to the Earth so that it became visible to the unaided eye for a very short time. It had and there was an article in the London Times that said that on Monday next, it will be situated near the star Iota Aurigae, and its tail will stretch all the way towards the star Beta Tauri, bridging the slender difference of two stars, I thought. It had to be Tempel-Respighi. I thought about it more. I even wrote to Sky and Telescope, and the editor there wrote me back. He had even worked out an ephemeris that had the comet's positions as it went through those stars on the night that the paper said it was going to go near those stars. I went to Dr. Mackenzie's office. I said, I've got it. It's comet Tempel-Respighi of 1864. And he said, no, it's not. And I said, why not? And he said, because, and here he was a Greek scholar and he was going to teach me some Greek. And he said, because an iota star, everybody knows, is much fainter than a beta star. Even you should know that. And he sits there with a grin on his face. And I said, aha. And I thought, I got him. It turns out that Iota is a star in Auriga. And the beta star is in a different constellation in Taurus. Iota has more Auriga has more bright stars than Taurus does. And I actually did a check on the magnitudes of those two stars. And Iota Aurigae is less than a magnitude fainter than Beta Tauri. He said, really? And I said, really? And he said, David, you got it. That's the comet. This will be the central chapter of your thesis. And boy, I had a lot of fun working on that for the next couple of years. Got my master's degree in 1979. Riding up to Kitt Peak with Brian Marsden one day. On the way back, he said, "Why don't you get a doctorate degree? You're smart enough." And I said, "Well, actually, somebody suggests that I do that every 4 or 5 years." And of course, I carefully consider that, stomp on the idea, and wait another 5 years. And someone else suggests it. And he said, "Well, I'm suggesting it now." Well, I stomped on the idea, and that nothing happened with it. And then about every 5 years after that, I'd consider it again. Then came our discovery of comet Shoemaker-Levy 9, a number of books that I had written about literature and astronomy, about comets, about meteors, eclipses, variable stars. And finally, one day, I went in, by this time I was married, I went into my wife's area and I said, "Wendy, maybe I should get my doctorate." And Wendy put down what she was working on and she said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Don't worry about it, because this idea comes every 5 years and I stomp on the idea and we don't have to worry about it for another 5 years." Then he said, "Before you go stomping, let's talk about this." And by the time we finished talking about it, I had decided that I was going to apply to do my doctorate. I wanted very much to do it at the Hebrew University, partly because Israel is a country that means so much to me, partly because our own Jewish heritage has so much to do with that. And also that the Hebrew University I knew had a very good English department. So I applied. They asked me a number of questions. Why do you want to do a PhD? You've discovered one of the most important comets in the history of science. Why do you need a doctorate? My answer to that, I couldn't give a good answer, except that because I want to finish what I started, even though it's decades later. This other question was, why here? That I had an answer for. Anyway, I was accepted to the Hebrew University, and I decided to do something like what I did with my master's degree so many years earlier, except this time wouldn't be about Hopkins, it would be about Shakespeare. It took me 10 years. It took me 10 years to finish my doctorate, but I finally did. And I remember, it seemed to me that the university was putting me through all kinds of hurdles to get through. And they'd say one thing, they'd say one other thing. And one day I got a letter from them. They said, "By the way, we have a new rule. One small chapter of your thesis has to be written in Hebrew." And my thesis advisor was livid about that. He said, "That's a crazy rule." And I said, "No, I'll do it." I found a friend from Israel who agreed to do it. I sent him the preface. He typed it on a Hebrew typewriter, and it worked. That worked. And then I know they were really fussy about the kind of paper. And I wrote them about the kind of paper. And the answer I got to that was totally unexpected. Walked into the East Wing office the next day in our home, and Wendy says, "I think you better look at this email I just got." And it was addressed to me, although Wendy got it. And it said, "Congratulations. Yesterday, the Senate of the university looked at your thesis and granted you the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. You now have a PhD. The ceremony will be in June. Please come. I'd like to meet you so that you can get the degree in person." We went. We had a wonderful visit to Israel and a wonderful place where we could look up at the sky, clear almost every night there. And you could actually see that there is so much astronomy and stars in Israel simply because the sky was there, clear, so often in that desert land. There was so much to study. And in the years since then, I've maintained my love of the night sky. I may be one of the only people that actually became a professional astronomer through a department of English literature, but I'm glad I did, because for me, it was the road not taken. It was something very special. It was a decision that I had made to follow my dream, but to follow it in my own way. One other writer that I found who was very interested in astronomy is Tennyson. And I have a few lines to quote from In Memoriam. A time to sicken and to swoon, when science reaches forth her arms to feel from world to world and charms her secret from the latest moon. And then as we go, he has quite a bit of writing about evolution and about the descent of man from lower animals. Contemplate all this work of time, the giant laboring in his youth, nor dream of human love and truth, and dying nature's earth and line to shape and use. Arise and fly, the reeling fawn, the sensual feast, move upward, working out the beast, and let the ape and tiger die. One of the things about Tennyson is that almost more than any other poem, he knew how to end a poem. He knew how to end it. And I knew that he knew how to end it because being familiar with his earlier poems, I knew that this one would have some interesting end to it. And as many of you know, In Memoriam was written as a result of his losing his best friend, who died of a stroke or something at the age in his 20s, and when Tennyson was very young. And I'm going to now quote the final few lines of In Memoriam, because he talks about a number of things. He was a religious man, and so he talks about God a lot. In fact, in the very first line of In Memoriam, strong son of God, immortal love. But here at the end, he goes again and he gets personal in the last few lines, talking about his lost friend and how much he misses him. But he's also talking about our understanding of nature, our understanding of the heavens. He's writing about something that it would have been unheard of back in the mid-19th century to think about, the cosmic connection. Is the universe expanding? Will it expand forever? Will it stop expanding and start contracting one day? All of these questions he deals with in the final stanza of In Memoriam. See, he did not know about the expansion of the universe that Hubble found in mid-20th century. He certainly didn't know about dark matter and dark energy. Then we really think we've discovered it, but we don't know. And if there is dark matter and dark energy, there's probably enough that will keep the universe expanding indefinitely. But he's thinking about all that, and he talks about a teleological universe where, in his view, God will be at the end of it someday, at some really important event that will take place. So he talks about his friend that he has lost. That friend of mine who lives in God, that God which ever lived and loved, one God, one law, one element, and one far off divine event to which the whole creation moves. A very simple, eloquent, and beautiful ending of the poem. There is so much in literature that deals with astronomy, and but I want to give enough time for questions, so I think I should start to wind things up at this point. I have just a few more that I'd like to quote from you. Thomas Jefferson, probably America's smartest president, who said these words in 1807, "I would more easily believe that 2 Yankee professors would lie than that stones would fall from heaven." As smart as he was, he couldn't believe that meteors would actually hit the Earth. Perry Como, a different idea in 1957, catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, save it for a rainy day. A beautiful, lovely song that I grew up with. And then something that I must read is what I consider to be the most beautiful 4 lines ever written in the English language. And I honestly think if Shakespeare were here at Astronomy on the Beach, he would say the same thing. If you asked him, what are the most beautiful lines written in English literature, I would not be surprised if he chose what I'm about to read now. These lines were penned by Thomas Gray, his Elegy in a Country Churchyard, circa 1751. Shakespeare was long gone when these lines were written, but I can find it hard to put them out of my mind. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The plowman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Now he's talking about a depressed scene at a churchyard, but I'd like to think there's a little more to it than that. Leaves the world to darkness and to me. It's almost as if Gray loves the darkness, as I do, because the darkness means the night sky, an integral part of our environment and something so important and so much fun to write. There are a lot of English poetry that has to do with astronomy. And in my mind, if I find a piece of poetry that isn't about astronomy, but should be, I can actually change it a little bit. For example, Sevilla D. Martin wrote His Eyes on the Sparrow in 1905, a beautiful, beautiful piece of verse. But I rewrote it a little bit so that it'll be a little more about the night sky. Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds arise, when songs give place to sighing, and when hope within me dies, I draw closer to the sky. From care it sets me free. My eye is on the sky, and I know it watches me. My eye is on the sky, and I know it watches me. And then we get to very modern stuff, and we get to my very favorite song of all. It's not a Beatles song. It's actually a song written by Leonard Cohen, the great Canadian poet, who died in 2016. Some of you may remember the election the next day took place in the United States, and Saturday Night Live was done on television that weekend. And they usually have what they called a cold start, a little bit of humor. But this time they had the pianist sitting there. And Wendy, what was her name? Kate McKinnon played Leonard Cohen's song, Hallelujah, which was so beautiful and so moving. And I just love that song. Anyway, this is my version, Cosmic Variations on a theme by Leonard Cohen. It's time to go outdoors tonight. The sky is dark. Some stars are bright. The Milky Way shines overhead. Now see a comet rises in the east. With end to strife, it brings us peace and calls us to a cosmic hallelujah. 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 I end with Ralph Hodgson's famous poem about looking up at the night sky from a field on top of a hill in England. I stood upon that silent hill and stared into the stars until my eyes were blind with stars, and still I stared into the sky. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, David. Excellent talk. You took us through your upbringing, and I have a book to go get. So we are opening up for questions. There's 5 minutes until I have to be at the next presentation. So I'm staying on with my dear friend and answering any questions. If you have any to post in the chat, please do so. There was a question from Dave New, David, about the watches that we noticed on your, I believe it would be your left arm.
Yeah, I was hoping you would notice that.
Yeah, so we want to know, we had a question if one of those tracks sidereal time and what the meanings are.
Well, I was hoping you wouldn't see them. I only put them on when I'm going to be home. If I'm going out, I just put on the first one, which actually tells the time. The second one does not. It just says it's 1:15 all the time. The third one is a watch that I've had since my own bar mitzvah. So I've had it for decades and it still works. And it says that it is 4 minutes to 2 in the morning, Jerusalem time. And the final watch is a darker watch, which says it is 4 minutes before 8 at the time of Acadia University on the Atlantic coast, Atlantic Standard Time. So they all tell a different time. And sorry you noticed them, but that's them.
Oh, that's okay. You know, there's this thing called hip hop where lots of watches are worn or big face watches, but who knows if any of them can tell time. And I love hip hop, so unfortunately that's my generation that likes to wear a bunch of flashy watches. Let me get John Panuto's question and wants to share some of your comet hunting experiences. I think we'll pick one for the purposes of this case since we're running close to time. So, but one comet hunting experience you'll always remember.
I will always remember all of them, but particularly the night I found my first comet. I've been searching for 19 years, and I was talking on the phone with a friend of mine about a conference we were planning in Tucson, Arizona for the following spring. It was November the 13th, 1984. And while I was talking with him, I picked up an object, a little cluster, which I knew what that was, and I knew that it was supposed to be there. Then I picked up a second object, also knew that was supposed to be there. Then I picked up a third object, and right next to it was a fuzzy spot that I didn't know about. And right away I said, "Oh my." And Dwayne said, "What do you got?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Is it a cluster?" I said, "No." But the way it's positioned right next to this open cluster, I better do a drawing of it and I'll call you back. So we ended the conversation. I did a drawing and I looked again through the eyepiece and I thought, Levy, you don't know how to draw. You might be a good astronomer, but you can't draw with beams. You're supposed to put the comet a little closer to the cluster than you had it. So I went race and put the comet again. And then I waited a few minutes, looked again. You still don't got it right. It's got to, Then I realized it's moving. And then I got really excited. I did its magnitude and I called a friend of mine at the Lowell Observatory, Brian Skiff. And I told him what I had. He said, "I'll call you back." And then the waiting was interminable. He finally called back. He said, "Send a telegram immediately." The next night, Brian Marsden called and he said he had confirmed it. It was also discovered the next day by Mike Rudenko in Massachusetts. And so the comet was named Comet Levy-Rudenko. And I think of all the nights I've been out under the night sky, that has got to be the most special one. There are other special ones too. Each of the other comet discoveries, one of them when I was talking with my brother over the phone, very similar thing. And the night we found, the night, not the night we were photographing Shoemaker-Levy 9, but the night, the next night that Carolyn was absolutely certain that she had a comet because it was confirmed by a photograph taken from another observatory. We were listening to music at the time, and it was Beethoven's First Symphony, the last movement. And you know that's a beautiful piece of music. It goes like that. And I finally said, that is Beethoven's Comet Symphony. And we kind of named it that informally after that. But every night out there under the sky is an important memory, whether I find anything or not.
Yep,
Good question.
agreed. And like I showed you, you've passed on your love of the night sky to me because I showed you that picture. Most of the time in between taking the picture, I just stand there and I look. That's, to me, the night sky speaks to everyone differently, and it speaks to me. That's where I'm at peace the most, is when I'm there. So applause to you. Excellent presentation. I'm going to read the names of the people that are here: Kenneth Burton, Harmony Smurf, Dale Thiem, Dave New, William Shaheen, Bob Trimbley, Mary Oldani, who's very much a poetry and art person, and I know she loved your presentation. William Shaheen, myself, Jim Forster made it. There's someone who signed on, Daz Jody Ward. We don't have a name, but he's here, and he's a new astronomer, or a new member of the Lowbrows. So he just joined. We have, I think I've called everyone's name that chimed in. John Panuto chatted in. I think I mentioned Ken Burton. Axel Mike, that's Mike from the Was Club with the big scopes, listened in. And Amy Cantu was here as well. So they all came to listen to you, to your talk, and I'm sure we all enjoyed it. So thank you, Dave, old friend. Thank you for the presentation. It was a beautiful presentation. I look forward
to Adrian.
The next one.
Thank you.
And I've got to run to set up another meeting. So I am going to leave, and when you're ready, I think we'll just drop off. I'll have Gordon Hansen says, great talk. And Dave New says, beware the shipping is steep when ordering the book, but it's all worth paying for to get the book. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave. David, when you're ready, just go ahead and drop off. And thank you once again. An excellent presentation.
Thanks, Adrian. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I should have done that.